Hey guys, welcome back to Americans, Coins, and Stuff. Today, if you read the title, we'll be doing this silver quarter. There's 9 new coins, and by the way, I put some of them in both of these books, but this one has the most. So this one only got one new edition, which, let's just get into it. It's the 48 to 64 book. There's nothing on this page still. 54. 1954. Yeah, that one, if you watched episode 3, then you would know that this exists. That I had this coin. Moving on. Yes. If you watched episode 3, then you would know that this exists. You would know this. And then we have a 1959. Okay. And I shouldn't be doing this. But it is a Denver. 1959 Denver. Of course, it is more common for this year, unfortunately. So, I wonder what caused it to have, the Denver is ahead of it. This happened, back then, this happened where 1959, the Denver Mint had more coins than the Philly. That happens on the nickels, too. 1960 Denver and 62 were also from episode 3. By the way, all of these are not the best coins. They don't really shine. So that's it for this book here. This book specifically. Now we'll be doing this. This book only had one coin. Back when I started and got these books and then put them in, we only had one coin. Let me just show it. We had the 1942. That was the only coin in this book. Which, yes, it was the only coin. Up until just Friday. When I added up until now. Because now there is now 6 more. Yeah, there's 6 more in this book. With the oldest being this, the 34. It's, I think, the lowest minted one in this book right now, besides the 32, which I do have. If you watched episode 1, then you would know that I have a 1932. It's just that it's in a different thing. It's in a, coin flip thing. And then we have the 32 and the 34 are the only ones they have that are from the 30s. Nothing from the 30s, mostly. Besides the one I'll show later. Oh, really? It's not a quarter, though. But we have 1941, which is 79 million. Which, just barely. It's only at 32,000. It's exact for some reason. But we have 1941. All of this with the 1934. Not gonna lie, the 1934. By the way, I forgot to tell you this, but the 1934 has a light motto, a medium motto, and a heavy motto. I have observed this, and I think it is the 1934 medium motto. Of course, I will allow you guys to to see if it actually is. Okay, sorry. That was way too blurry. I will let you guys see if this is the medium motto or any other mottos. Or the two other mottos. The 3040 has, I don't think has that motto. It's just the medium motto, I guess. Nothing for the 30s besides that 32 from episode 1. And then we move on to 41. 41 is the year the U.S. entered war. And that was when I think like a military, I think like a country nuked or like attacked a Puerto Rico war base, which caused the U.S. to enter the war. And yes, Puerto Rico is a territory owned by the U.S. But it was the year U.S. officially claimed war, joined World War II. Of course, there's nothing really besides these two coins. But this one was from episode 3. This one is the new coin. Now we move on to the 4 newer coins. There's a 1943. It's not the only 1943. Actually, never mind, I lied. The 1934 is not. Okay, never. I will tell you that later, but let's see. So we got the 1943. It is a bit worn down, but this was the year that the U.S. started minting steel cents. Of course, there are few copper cents made in 1940. There are a few, but it is pretty rare. So, and there's only about like 30. Okay, sorry about that. But 1943 was the year the U.S. started minting steel cents, and steel cents were basically the number one thing that were used for 1943 because copper was mostly back in. But 1943 was the year when steel cents were minted. Of course, there are 30 existing coppers in 1943s. Those are pretty rare. I don't have one of them, though. But this was a year they used silver on the nickels in 1942. Although, yes, the only reason why they made steel cents in 1943 was because copper was scarce, and copper was mostly used in World War II to make stuff like it. Moving on, we got 1943S. The 1943S is somehow nicer than the 1943 at most, I think. But it is definitely an S mint mark, if you can see that. Right there. Yes, I can confirm that's an S mint mark. Right in the bottom of it. And that's an S mint mark. Moving on, we have the one I accidentally mistaken, as I think we moved on. 1944. This was the year when the U.S. just decided to change the copper, but some steel cents ended up slipping out into circulation, and it's around the same quantity as the as 1943 since. But yeah, there's nothing really to say about this year. Mostly, we got 1945. 1945 was the year when the U.S. created the first bomb and decided to launch it on Japan. Well, certain city in Japan. And then after that, World War II ended. Of course, during the time from 1934, or it might not be. The election of 1931? No. The election of 1931, I think, was like elected a president, or no. The election of 1933 elected Franklin D. Roosevelt, which led the U.S. through the Great Depression. And by the way, back in 1932, it was the reason why there's so few in 1932 is probably because of the Great Depression, and also they didn't mint any quarters in 1931 and 1933, probably because of the Great Depression. And also the Great Depression affected coins. And back in 1930 was a pretty decent year for coins. And then 1931 hit, and then the stock market crashed, and then the Great Depression just started, and they barely minted any coins. Especially for the quarters were affected heavily, and only the 1932 remains. While 1931 and 1933 are lost, were not minted. Which, by the way, by the time 1930, it was only the early 30s were affected, and then it started to recover around 1934, where they started minting more coins. But yeah, and he led it through 1934 all the way to 1945. Yeah. He died the year after he got elected. The year after he got elected. He died in his 4th term. And a presidential term is about 4 years each. So he led the country through the Great Depression from 1932? Actually, it made more sense. Yeah, correct. He got elected in 1932. His 2nd term was started in 1936. And then he got elected 1940. And then he was elected again in 1944. So he was basically he had one of the longest terms, and then the year later he died. Sad. It's kind of sad, though. He died that early. He died just with his 4th term. And if he kept going, he might have done a 5th or even 6th term if he was lucky. Although, if he kept doing terms, he would eventually die from old age. By diseases caused by old age. But he had polio, too. Well, that's probably something. But yeah, he did have polio. And back then, in the 50s and 40s, polio was pretty common. And now there is a vaccine so that you can't get polio and also chickenpox. But yeah. So that's it for this book. That was a lot of information just for one book, though. But now we're moving on to the 2 coins specifically. Starting with the half, this is a mercury dime. It looks pretty nice, though. It definitely looks kind of nice. It looks shinier when it was in light, but back when I got it. But yeah. But it is pretty nice. There is no mint mark. I've checked. They both don't have mint marks. The only ones that have mint marks is the 1959D and the 1943S, which, by the way, the 1943S is rare. I can't really... 1940, I don't know what happened in 1940. But then we have this coin, 1936. It is a $50. It's the second, at least it's around this, it's at least around the second to third place in my it's at least around second to third place. Just probably behind the 1932, because it's like, it looks very, because the 1932 that I have is an AU change, AU. And that was back in episode 1. And now this one might beat it. This one might be the coin to be able to beat the 1932 quarters that I had back in episode 1. Which, if it does, and it takes second place in my collection, I would probably make it I would probably put it in a flip if I could. But I do have a lot of flips. But yeah, that's mostly it for today. And goodbye, and watch for more interesting updates that I have on my collection. Goodbye, and see you next time whenever I do another video. Probably a month or weeks later, I guess. But I'll go. Goodbye, and watch me for interesting facts.